Well, like Bill, I want to welcome everybody here. This is a great turnout, and I'm really thrilled to have this panel put together and everyone here. I sort of prepared some remarks. I can't quite speak off the cuff like Bill can there. But I was thinking about how these shows came together also. And as Bill said, Tom Meredith offered up this Ansel Adams show. The museum was saying, should we put this on? Let's do this. Let's put this out. And as an educator in photography, as a teacher of photography here, I thought I wanted to make something that would be a little more pedagogically challenging to my students now. They know Ansel Adams' work. He's very well known. And seeing it is extremely important because if you've had a chance to see the show, you know how absolutely beautiful those prints are. And when you see them in reproduction, it just doesn't come across. So that was all very important. But thinking about what my students might go out and do after that, I thought, let's sort of pair this up and compare it in some way to what some contemporary photographers were doing. So the way I tried to approach that, first and foremost, was I thought, since Ansel was mostly known for photographing in the West and most of his collection was Western photography, I would look at photographers who had worked in the West. Then the other thing that I wanted to do to make it a little bit more complex for my students to sort of see those relationships was, so much of contemporary photography is in color now. And Terry and Mike both work in color, but they're going to show some fantastic examples of what is being done now and how people are looking at place and landscape now with color photography. But I thought since Ansel's work was in black and white, it might be too easy for my students to say, oh, well, there's the difference. It's just in color. And, of course it looks different. I wanted them to see some more of a one-to-one relationship. So I chose only photographers who worked achromatically. I don't want to say black and white because if you've seen the show, Joni Sternbach's pictures are wet plate collodion and they have this wonderful sort of 19th century warmth to them. And Lois Connor's are platinum prints, which also have a sort of a warmth to them. So they're not really black and white, but they're achromatic. So that was sort of the idea of putting the show together. But the other thing that I sort of came to with this is I wanted all of these people to have encountered the West and the sort of same views that Ansel did, but to have come along a little bit later. I'm going to go back to my notes here because I'm sort of rambling all of a sudden. In the catalog, the Changing Views catalog, I wrote a statement that a few people, that has annoyed a few people. I put in there, all photographs can be seen as a form of acceptance. And a few people were sort of like, especially people with a point to make, didn't really like that. They thought, this is really sort of what we're trying to say. And of course, all artists want to believe that there's a practical use to their work. I wanted to talk a little bit about that notion of acceptance and see where that goes here. What I like about that is it sort of acknowledges in photography both the process and the content. Process in, I guess with the exception of the way we sometimes think about digital photography now, that it can be manipulated, but process in that the camera can really only record what's in front of it. As much as we might try, as photographers, we can edit and crop and we can frame, put things out of frame or put things in the frame, or of course if there's something we want to be part of the picture, we can position it prominently in the photograph. So we can do all those things, and if we're smart about it, we pay enough attention, we just might get lucky enough that photograph looks like what we thought it was going to look like. But it's all about just sort of accepting that almost one-to-one relationship of what the light that comes into the lens. And so that's part of the acceptance. But the content part, which can get a little perplexing for people, is related in a sense to this environment. For contemporary photographers, it's no longer possible. It seems no longer possible to make an image of undiluted nature that can move an audience. The photographer Robert Adams pointed out that our experience of life has made it impossible to trust that picture. We sort of just don't encounter that kind of world anymore, and so we have a hard time trusting it. So contemporary photographers have to look at the landscape that they find in front of them, the one that can be really as equally spectacular and as equally sublime as anything that Ansel Adams stood in front of, but is really the one that's made up of us, our everyday projects, our lawns that we mow, the sidewalks that we put in, all the way to landfills and oil spills. But that's what contemporary photographers sort of stand in front of. And so they have to find a way to try to tell a truth about that place that they've been. And I think that when it comes to the topic today, what that truth usually is or the sort of value of that, or how we judge that, is whether we can deem that landscape as acceptable in some way, the acceptability of that landscape, which is a weird way to think about the environment, but you know, we are so surrounded by this sense of the marginal that that's what, but by being able to accept that, which is what so many contemporary landscape photographers are doing, we're able to sort of embrace a little bit wider sort of sense of conservation and environmental action. My last paragraph here. These artists refuse to sort of turn away from or delete the evidence of abuse and neglect in the landscape and the work because they know that's the truth. And I thought I would sort of close this by thinking about like the best of that work and the work that's in the Looking Show and the work that Terry does. It does more than that. It does more than just accept the landscape. And I love this line that the photographer Louis Hine is famous for. Hine was the photographer who was photographing child labor and the sort of changing conditions of the city. And he said that he hoped to show what was wrong so that we could try to change it, but also to show what was right so we could take comfort from it. And I think that the best of contemporary landscape photography does that. And I'll just say in closing, I'm really excited to hear what these folks have to say about the topic and the subject, and I'm looking forward to that. Should I stay here and introduce Finus? Well, I'm really thrilled that Finus Dunaway is here to be, I suppose, moderator, sort of keynote, anchor, all those kind of things on this panel. But Finus comes to us from Trent University in Canada. He mentioned last night that he is a Canadian citizen, but he's really a Southern boy. He comes from Georgia. Alabama, I'm sorry. Yes, a big difference. That's right, I'm sorry, huge. But he did his undergraduate work at UNC in Chapel Hill, and he was gradually moving his way north because he did his PhD in Rutgers, and now he's in Canada. I first encountered Finus's work when Bill and I started thinking about this panel. I was familiar with the book that had come out on the anniversary of the New Topographics exhibition. The book was called Reframing New Topographics, and it was a number of people who wrote about the landscape photographers. I'm not sure if you're going to talk about New Topographics, but in the 70s, a group of landscape photographers, an exhibition was put together that was a seminal sort of change in the way landscape was represented in new photography. And Finus wrote an essay in there called Beyond Wilderness, Robert Adams' New Topographics and the Aesthetic of Ecological Citizenship. And I didn't have to go too much farther than the title to realize that this was probably the perfect person for this panel and symposium. But the article was fantastic. Finus's research is, as Bill said, is in American studies, sort of modern US cultural and environmental history, visual representations of the contemporary landscape photography in particular. He's currently working on a book called Seeing Green, Visual Media and the Making of American Environmentalism. That'll be out from the University of Chicago. And so with that, I'm going to